Good morning, I'm Pastor Allen. Today is Wednesday, September 30th, and we are doing our daily Bible study. And a while back, we were looking at a passage in Matthew chapter 23 about the 7 woes, and I skipped over those and said that we would come back to those. Well, today we're coming back to the 7 woes, and we're going to start with woe number 1. And Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and the teachers of the law in Matthew chapter 23. And so verse 13, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to enter." Well, when Jesus is speaking, he is speaking exactly as a prophet would. And Jesus took on the role of a prophet, especially when he was dealing with the teachers of the law and the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin, because that would be the only way to get their attention. And Jesus tells them that they're teaching, the things that they're teaching, the things that they're doing are going to lead to disaster. In fact, Jesus calls them hypocrites, which meant the things that they were doing, they were just doing them simply for attention. From blowing trumpets on the street corners to making sure people knew what they were giving, how they were giving, making sure that they had the best seats in the synagogues and at the banquets. In other words, it was all about them. They wanted everybody to focus on them. And they were hypocrites because they said they were doing it in God's name, but they weren't. They were really doing it to benefit themselves. And we know, or should know, this is not what God desires. In addition, when it says it also kept others from entering the kingdom, there are 2 main reasons. Number 1, their teachings were false and just plain wrong most of the time. And the second thing is their teaching created and put a burden on people who heard them teach. In other words, they added things to the Word of God. They added things to the Old Testament Bible. They added rules. They added things that were impossible to do. People would fail and walk away, or they would copy them, and they would fall into the same trap that the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were falling into. They weren't doing what God wanted them to do. They weren't doing what the Old Testament required. And the problem with this is these rules weren't needed. They were wrong. They led people down the wrong path. They confused people. And because they taught this false doctrine, it kept people away from heaven. What they were teaching and what they required, it was impossible to do. It's still impossible to do. People failed, they walked away, and that's why Jesus and Paul taught that heaven is a free gift of God. And there's nothing that we can do to earn it, and there's nothing we do to deserve it. It is free. It is God's gift to us. Because if we try to get to heaven by the rules, we're going to fail. We're not going to make it. It's impossible to do. But that's exactly what was happening here with the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. And the biggest problem with these so-called leaders is that they were after more power, more money, even more status. They were already leaders, and people looked up to them. but it wasn't enough. And so we've got to depend on God. We've got to depend on faith, because that's the only thing that's going to get us into heaven. What we do, what we say is not going to get us into heaven. And if we continue to follow the wrong things, then we'll actually be kept out of heaven. And that's something I don't want, and I know that you don't want. So have faith, trust God, and I'll talk to you later.